So it's I think it's a very interesting space, and I think it actually is a segue into this next story that I think is worth chatting about, and that is an interesting article from CIO.com talking about what they're calling their two-tier approach to Gen AI. And this isn't horribly novel on the one hand, but on the other hand, when I read this article, because I'm sort of like down on CIO sometimes, it's like I feel like a lot of their articles are fluffy.
Hmm.
This one I went through and it's like, that's actually some really good insights. And their basic premise is this, is that we need to be looking at Gen AI not in this one big bucket, but that there's sort of these two categories. There's what they call AI tools, which are things like ChatGPT, GTP, and the the Microsoft's, Copilots, and the things that are general user productivity. And the challenge, as we've talked about with a lot of that level of tools, is that they are effectively driving incremental time savings. So they're really like efficiency plays. And in fact, somebody in the article called it time shavers, right? It's not anything, it's just like you're saving a little bit up every activity, and that can add up, but it's a small thing. And they're contrasting it with what they're calling AI solutions. And these are business focused, specific, typically tied to a specific workflow or a specific business process, and can actually drive a business impact at a holistic level, not just on an
Yeah.
individual productivity level. And the last part that was interesting is that to look at your investment strategy around AI to separate those two, that they are not the same. But secondly, that AI tools become an on-ramp, meaning that an AI solution by definition requires a much more fundamental transformation of the way you work, of those operating workflows, and that can be scary and that can be traumatic. And so that the use of AI tools can be that gateway to get people used to interacting with AI in a way that when you then start introducing these solutions, it's less traumatic. And I just thought it was a really interesting insight of kind of how you look at it.
Yeah, and I liked that AI tool versus AI platform or AI solution approach as well, especially because I feel like that does get confused a lot when we're looking at the generalized AI tools. We're talking about something that ends up being more of a personal utility at the end of the day, but not necessarily as defined as, say, a spreadsheet or a word processor or a slide tool. This is going to be an addition to that, call it the Office suite or the app suite, productivity app suite at the end of the day, which is fine. But it does mean that there are limits to how productive this can be as a general tool, because we're basically talking about adding another calculator to the productivity suite. And I think there can be sometimes be some confusion about how to calculate the productivity of this, because we start shaving seconds off of a process and calling that productivity without even thinking, well, what am I going to use those 7 seconds for? Is there something that is higher value that I can actually complete in 7 seconds? Like oftentimes not. So it's a false type of productivity. If you've got something that's 7 seconds times 300 times a day, and then you can use that. I just outmathed myself, but if you could spend that extra hour on actually doing something useful, yes, that's valuable, but you're not guaranteed that, and it's hard to say you're going to use Gen AI like 200, 300 times a day to get to a meaningful amount of time.
Well, it's something I've been talking about for a while now. So is that IT, forget AI, for most of its history has been focused on efficiency, and efficiency has a limit. It has its value, right? But it has a limit. So
Mhm.
the real question is, how do you get to improving effectiveness and improving productivity? And to your point, productivity is rooted in efficiency, but we have to say, well, how am I transforming that into something that actually creates value in some way? Now,
Mhm.
sometimes that can be simply in the form of, hey, I'm making their life a little bit easier and reducing the stress levels. Some of my friends in the IT industry are spending, a lot of time talking about IT mental health. I think there's value in that. Right. So I think that there's lots of different ways we have to look at this. But the other thing I think that happens when you start putting these in these buckets and you look at them a little bit differently is you start to realize that these AI solutions, as this article is calling them,
Mhm.
require this fundamental transition or transformation of your business process, of your workflow itself. And this is becoming very, very important as we start thinking about the use cases around agentic AI solutions, because they are fundamentally sort of following along these workflows, these paths of
Right.
your business processes. And if you're not transforming them, then you're going to probably limit your ability to gain much out of it. And so it ends up causing you to really take this a much broader workflow or process centric view when you're talking about a solution. And that becomes this really strong demarcation point between that and how I would look at just a tool that sits there and sort of is available when I need it. Like you said, a calculator. So I just
Mhm.
thought it was a really useful framework and a really useful way of sort of looking at it. And I think we talked a couple weeks ago that Gartner identified the number one issue for CIOs right now is having an AI strategy. And I think this is a great way to sort of help frame what that strategy should look like.
Right. And when thinking about agentic AI or an AI solution, I think one of the biggest challenges right now is trying to figure out how do I create this open-ended UX that could provide me with a whole bunch of different types of answers without giving away state secrets or any sort of providing any sort of governance issues. For instance, recently I saw a chatbot that was supposed to be for healthcare, but it would also give racist answers, which you obviously don't want happening on behalf of a doctor or a nurse. Like all, these basic things that should have been checked beforehand, but never quite were. But they're possible for the same reason that AI, this generative AI, is also very valuable. That you do have a very open-ended set of questions and answers that you can potentially provide. And that's actually a strength as long as you understand that there are also governance issues that have to come into play at that solution level that have to fit into HIPAA and other basic personal identifiable information, all of these other issues that come into play for standard software and data use cases.
I think we're going to find that, if you're a CIO or if you're an enterprise leader, you start looking at this, you're going to end up, I think you're going to discover there's like this sliding scale. There's going to be some AI like ChatGPT, like the Microsoft Copilots that I can simply just install, hand it over to my employees, maybe give them a little bit of training on how to do prompt engineering, and off they go. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there is a whole lot of skin in the game where I'm having to really think about my data flow, my data architecture, my workflows, and exactly when and how I embed AI into that flow. And it's probably not going to be a single flavor. It's probably going to be elements of generative and traditional, predictive, and different components of it to actually deliver the outcome that I'm seeking. And that means a lot more of the onus is going to be on you as the enterprise team to figure that out and to orchestrate. That becomes much more bespoke. And I think that's good. I think the average enterprise is going to end up with all of it. And it also opens up the door to, well, then how do you manage the responsibility? Because all of that is going to be enabled by these technology partners. And it just continues to increase the stakes, which is, I think, something that's pretty relevant right now, and maybe a lesson. I guess we'll see.